Hello and welcome to Revision Tips for SIPS Level 5, Advanced Diploma in Procurement and Supply. This is Module 1, Managing Teams and Individuals, and it's Learning Outcome 2, which is to understand and apply approaches to managing individuals involved in the procurement and supply function. So, trait theory was formalised by Stodgill in 1974, and it assumes that the successful managers are born and certain traits are more suitable for certain roles, and good managers are good because they have the right combination of personality traits to make them so. Now, McCall and Lombardo identified 4 primary traits required for good leadership. So if you look at the left-hand diagram, you've got emotional stability and composure, admitting errors, good interpersonal skills, and intellectual breadth. So consider some of the managers you've had in your career. And other traits, what other traits did the managers have? Now, Blake and Moulton created the leadership grid based on 2 dimensions. The concern for people and the concern for results. So that's on the right-hand side. This produced 5 zones. You've got the impoverished management, which is disorganised and ineffective. You've got a produce or perish management, where authoritarian leadership, people's needs are secondary to the task. Middle of the road management is compromised leadership, leading to mediocre performance and failing to meet the needs of the people fully. The country club management, which is accommodating and fun, but failing to be productive. And then team management, leaders committed to delivering results and motivating their team, the most effective leadership style according to Nordhaus. So the most successful leaders adapt their behavioural style according to the situation. Einzig's hierarchical model of personality was developed in 1973. It describes inherent personality traits that are centred on 3 criteria. You've got extroversion versus introversion, neuroticism versus emotional stability, and psychoticism. So as you can see here on the extravision, these people are sociable, lively, active, assertive, sensation-seeking and carefree, dominant, surgeon, and venturesome. You've then got the neuroticism, which is anxious, depressed, guilt, low self-esteem, tense, irrational, shy, moody, and emotional. And then the psychoticism, which is aggressive, cold, egocentric, impersonal, impulsive, and antisocial, unempathetic, creative, and tough-minded. So you can just see how these personality traits are centered over these criteria, and you've got obviously the worst case scenarios versus the best case scenarios here. Now there are lots of models you can look at here. I mean, you've got things like Lochin, Lewin, and Cattle, lots of different researches, but you need to think about summarizing them somehow, because despite their drawbacks, some of the models have produced tools and techniques that can be used by organizations to measure individual differences. And it's important to remember that managers are individuals too, and developing self-awareness of personal behavioral traits is an important part of managerial development. The most important aspect of behavioural theory of leadership is the idea that successful behavioural styles and approaches can be learned and developed regardless of your individual's personality. So a manager needs to understand and consider the similarities as well as the differences between their members of staff. The big 5 personality traits describe stable characteristics of an individual. So you've got conscientiousness, agreeableness, neuroticism, openness to experience, and extroversion. So the conscientiousness, This is being organised versus careless. So you might see some self-discipline here, duty, planning and spontaneity. The agreeableness is friendly versus hostile. So you could get compassion, cooperation, or suspicion and antagonism. Neuroticism is nervous versus stable. So here you might see confidence, anger, anxiety, vulnerability and security. Openness to experience is the cautious versus the curious. So here you might see an appreciation of art, emotion, inventive and consistent. And the extroversion is outgoing versus reserved. So think about the energy levels, the solidarity, social, positive emotions, and seeking stimulation. So think about it for yourself. Where do you think you fall on each of these dimensions? Hogan and Kaiser determined that individual personalities determine a number of outcomes, including their job performance, their leadership, absenteeism, career satisfaction, teamwork, and performance in terms of outcomes such as life expectancy and well-being behaviour. There is conflict in research regarding the usefulness of personality testing in personnel selections for the purpose of predicting potential job performance. The use of self-reporting means that personality assessments for personal selection is vulnerable to faking, as candidates can identify favourable test responses. Now, an idiopathic approach is a philosophical one. Now, idiopath comes from the Greek word idios, meaning own or private. It means what makes each other unique, or each of us unique. Now, Rogers' humanistic approach to self-concept was based on three elements. You've got the self-worth, which is how individuals think about themselves, self-image, which is how they see themselves, and the ideal self, about how the individual would like to be. Now, Rogers argues that an individual is in a state of harmony when their self-image and ideal are in close proximity. The more balanced the individual is, the higher their sense of self-worth becomes. But emotions play a significant role in individuals' behaviour. They've been subject to psychological research for over a century. Now, an individual's behaviour responds to an emotional reaction which results from unconscious thoughts, and this makes it different from rational or logical thoughts. Emotional intelligence suggests that there's a physiological state beyond simple mental insight, which focuses on individuals' knowledge and ability to manage and positively express their emotions. But the reverse situation occurs when the individual gives in to a sense of unmanaged emotions that negatively affect their activities. So the concept of emotional intelligence is the idea that individuals affect and are affected by the behaviours of others, and that job performance is affected by an individual's ability to manage the effect of their personal behaviour. And there are two elements to this. You've got the intrapersonal, which is intelligence about personal feelings, motivations and fears, and the interpersonal, which is the intelligence based on the ability to understand the desires, motivations and intentions of others. Now, diversity is how workforce composition varies based on factors such as age, gender, ethnicity, disability, sexual orientation, religion and culture. Schneider stated that people make the place, which suggests that diversity in an organisation is a result of decisions made by both the organisation and the individuals. But he argued that self-selecting is a choice by whether or not individuals want to join an organisation or not. And that means the process of selection and self-selection affects workforce composition, either increasing or limiting diversity in an organisation. Some interesting statistics about the workplace diversity in the UK is that BME population has an underemployment rate of 15.3%. 64% of women and 65% of men aspire to a top leadership position. 9.7 of executives are women in FTSE 100 companies. 32% of LGBT employees hide their sexual orientation. And 12.5% of the working age population are from BME backgrounds, but only 10% of the workforce are BME and 6% hold top management positions. So when managing the procurement and supply functions, some countries have statutory obligations such as the Equalities Act 2010, and that ensures that the workplace is diverse. Managing teams and individuals is a key part to the organisational performance. This means that there is a moral case for ensuring that the workplace is inclusive and that individuals are managed fairly without being discriminated against due to their identity or background. So diversity is about recognising difference and seeking to leverage that difference to achieve organisational objectives. Inclusion is about valuing and sharing differences and encouraging contribution from a range of different perspectives. Now, individual learning styles can impact on the management style and approach. Lewington's experimental learning model is by Kobe, 1984. This is a constructivist model of learning based on the concept of creating meaning from experience. And it aims to help the learner learn about and from the experience. So it begins with concrete experience, which can be an ill-structured and complex experience. And it continues with the individual entering a phase of observation and critical reflection. It leads to a formation of abstract conceptualization where new concepts are created, and moves on to active experimentation, which requires individuals to take what they've learnt from that process and make decisions to solve problems. The experiential learning model is a systematic learning process that is a continuous loop based on experience and reflection in order to facilitate learning. Linear progression, though, at each stage of the model will result in instrumentally learned skills and knowledge, whereas experience and action without learning lacks meaning. So learning effectiveness is improved when individuals are highly skilled, engaging in all four models of learning at contextualized appropriate times. Now, the Honey and Mumford one on the right-hand side builds on Kobe's learning theory. They developed a learning style questionnaire that explores a learner's behavioural tendencies. And the four learning styles are: you're either an activist, which is where those who learn by doing; a theorist, who learns by understanding the theory, the model, the concepts before they do any action; the pragmatics are those who learn by putting what they've learned into practice; and the reflectors are those who observe and reflect on what's happened. So we know that learning is an essential part of the human experience. It results on growth and development, and ideally is lifelong. We can separate the different concepts of learning in the workplace by looking at the methods that are used to facilitate and coordinate learning. So we have education, which is academic learning and quite formal; training, which is developed in the workplace, and you're developing workplace skills, which again can be formal; and then development, which is the process and outcomes of learning that contribute to the whole person. Garavan proposed a multi-level model of strategic human resource development. This is SHRD, and that operates at 4 levels. Firstly, the context. This is interactions between learning and development and the general environment, such as the steepled factors. The internal context, the interactions with the internal environment, including your organisation's strategy, design, culture, and management style. Job values and uniqueness is the importance with which an organisation views particular jobs. And professional expectations is the expectations of individuals with regards to how their talent potential will be used. including reference to their psychological contract, employability outcomes, and professional development. Now, knowledge itself is a fluid concept. It can be addressed from a number of different angles, such as your state of mind, an object, a process, a condition of having access to information, or a capability. But there are two concepts to knowledge. If these concepts are developed as part of continuous learning process, they can be converted into and add value to organisational learning. So we've got tacit knowledge, which is subjective and developed by an individual through personal experience. It can be described as know-how. Sometimes you don't know why you know it, you just know it. And this knowledge can be transferred through social learning. Then explicit knowledge, which is fairly objective. Individuals can codify, pass on, teach this knowledge to others by sharing relevant materials. Now, approaches to learning and theories that fall behind that go into three distinct categories. Behaviouralism, which is knowledge here is gained in response to circumstances and a corresponding behavioural reaction. Cognitive constructivism, which is where learners construct new knowledge by proactively building on past learning experience. And social constructivism is learning is a process that's built in the social context. Knowledge creation and transfer is at the centre of organisational learning. It offers the opportunity for innovation and creativity in approaching change and continuous improvement. Initiating conditions where individuals have the freedom to experiment, learn from experience, and discuss their experiences and consider opportunities and possibilities for the future. And that will create the conditions for organisational learning and knowledge creation and sharing. There are three main approaches to learning, including behaviouralist, cognitive constructivists, and social constructivists. Now, there was this developed theoretical framework for analysing organisational learning and knowledge. The framework depicts the following. So the organisational learning and knowledge management results from an iterative cycle of experiences starting with knowledge, which results from an interaction between tasks performed in organisational context. The knowledge in turn interacts with the environmental context, which changes the organisational context. The changed organisational context interacts with organisational experience to create knowledge. And within the realm of active contexts, individuals have the capability to take action. This includes the tools they will have to be able to apply to the performance tasks. The latent context affects individuals and their abilities to perform tasks, but the individual does not have the capability for action. And this framework highlights that the elements of organisational environment in which knowledge is created, retained and transferred. And in regards to the active and latent context where learning occurs. The individual member and organisational tools are repositories for organisational knowledge. And the knowledge can be transferred by moving tools and people from one area of the organisation to another. That organisational knowledge can be moved out of the organisational context by moving people, products and services out of the organisation into the external environment. So if staff are poached or products are being reverse engineered by competitors. Now, employee motivation has strong links to productivity as well as having other organisational benefits. Studying an individual's motivation can help a manager to understand how to ensure that the individual is willing to be at work and to do the work that needs to be done to the best of their abilities. But motivation comes from the Latin word mover, meaning to move. It's the internal and external factors that contribute to human behaviour and workplace action and job performance. And there are plenty of generalisations about what motivates individuals in the workplace. One hand, there's an idea that people need change over time. So, for example, what motivates you as a teenager is not likely to be the same when you hit your middle age. And one classification that is useful in determining motivational factors in the workplace is extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. The extrinsic motivation is the tangible outcomes or benefits that the individual receives in return for work, such as rewards and remuneration and pay and career progressions. These factors are ones that organisations can give or withdraw as they see fit, so it's not controlled by the individual. The intrinsic motivation is the benefits that are aligned by physiological outcomes for the individual in terms of job satisfaction, such as a sense of personal achievement. But all individuals that are willing to perform a role will be based in part on whether or not managers and organisations are able to produce work motivation patterns that drive job satisfaction to the individual. However, frustration can be a negative response to dissatisfaction, and the individual could turn combative or defensive, and their behaviour will show itself in one of four ways. Could be aggressions, where you display a destructive outcome, such as physical or verbal attacks against those who are seen to be the problem. Regression, often referred to as childlike, in that they may seem as if the individual is having a tantrum or lashing out. There's fixation, which is when an individual becomes fixated. They display repetitive behaviours that fail to move the person or the situation forward. And withdrawal, which takes regression to another level, because the individual appears indifferent, refuses to take part in particular activities, or literally give up and resign. There are four predominant categories of motivational theory. You've got the content theories, which review the nature of motivation and how the needs of the individuals change over time. And the key theories here is Maslow's, McLennan, Alderfer, and Hertzberg. So on the left-hand side, this is the Hertzberg model, which is a two-factor theory. You've got the motivators and the hygiene factors. Now, process theories examine the evolution of motivation and the stages that the individual will progress through in relation to their circumstances. So the key theorist here is Vroom, Porter and Lawler, the expectancy theory. Equity theories study how resources are distributed in relation to others and whether the ratio between the individual contribution versus the reward is fair. Adams is the key theorist here, referring to inputs and outputs, which you can see on the right-hand side of the screen. And then goal theories assess how people are motivated to achieve a common goal or a challenge and are willing to compete and complete the task. And Locke is the key theorist here. Now, dimensions of job satisfactions, as you can see on the screen, can be individual factors, which is an individual's personality traits and skills. It could be social factors, the quality of the team or group working in that organisation. Cultural factors like power and politics and how that's influenced throughout your organisation. Organisational factors like leadership and management styles. And then environmental factors from the macro environment or the task environment factors. The weighting that a person places on each dimension is as unique as the individual. The job characteristic model developed by Hackman and Oldman considers skill variety, which is the range of tasks performed and the ability of an individual to use a range of skills and talents to complete the task. But it also considers task identity, which is the individual's ability to complete the whole job from start to finish and to be able to see the outcomes of their work. It considers task significance, the impact of the individual's job on others, both internally and externally, and then autonomy, which is the freedom of an individual in executing work in their role, including independence in decision making and discretion with regards to what action needs to be taken to achieve the task. And finally, feedback, the provision for direct feedback, providing the individual with clarity regarding their job performance. And that can be used by managers to assess an individual's job profile for motivational potential and make changes based upon the core dimensions in order to improve job satisfaction. Now, alienation is a disconnect between an individual and their work. Work alienation has its roots in Marx's economic and physiological manuscripts, where he explained that alienation is the separation of a worker from the product that was created, the process by which it was created, or from others who are involved in the production or consumption of the product. Now, Seaman argued that alienation was multidimensional construction made up of 5 social physiological areas. So we have powerlessness, which is the realization that the individual has a lack of power. A meaninglessness, which is where the individual believes that they have to do little, or whatever they does has got little or no meaning. The normlessness is a breakdown of the social norms resulting and relating to an individual's conduct in the workplace. And that results in the individual feeling mistrusted. You've got social isolation, where the individual feels separated from their work colleagues and lack personal relationships. And the self-estrangement, which is where an individual expresses a general dislike for work or distances themselves from the idea that work is central to their life. Now, job design is the content, duties and tasks required in the job role performed by the individual. And it's an important contributor to an individual's motivation and job satisfaction. It's got a significant role to play in the intrinsic sense of fulfillment that an individual will experience as a result of their work. Job enlargement is about increasing the duties and tasks of the job to make it more challenging and rewarding for the individual, especially where upward progression opportunities are limited. And then job enrichment is about enriching and increasing an individual's autonomy and responsibility, providing opportunities to involve them in decision making. Now, flexible working is when work arrangements are offered with a degree of flexibility for the individual around where, when, and how they work. Now, as family life has become more varied and a number of women are entering the workforce, flexible working arrangements have increased and become quite a key topic. So I'm just going to look through some of the typical flexible arrangements that you might come across. So you've got part-time working, working less than the full-time equivalent. Term time working, where the individual is permanently employed by an organisation but takes paid or unpaid leave during the school holidays. Job sharing is, although the individual is working part-time, they share the responsibility for the work with somebody else. Flexi time is where individuals are permitted to begin and end work when they choose, although there will be core hours that need to be maintained. Compressed hours is where the individual works full-time, but the hours are compressed into longer periods or longer days. Annual hours is similar to flexi time, but contracted hours are fixed over a year and the individual may not have choice over their working patterns. Working from home on a regular basis rather than working in an office. You've got mobile working and teleworking, which can be in remote locations. Career breaks, which is possible for some individuals to maintain their employment while taking a career break, a sabbatical, or an extended period of leave. You could be employed on a commissioned outcomes basis, where the individual has no fixed hours, but has to work to an agreed output target, like a job and finish. And a 0 hours contract is a controversial form of contract that has arisen as a result of the gig economy, because the individual has no guarantee of work and no minimum hours. That's the end of chapter 2. Thank you very much.